The Nashville Predators season is over. After entering the 2024-25 season with a lot of optimism following a surprisingly good season the year before with first-year head coach Andrew Brunette, where the Predators made the playoffs but bowed out in a tough series against the Vancouver Canucks, there was a lot of optimism coming into this year, especially when GM Barry Trotz went out and spent heavily in the offseason with big-name acquisitions like Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Shea, and of course Steven Stamkos. A lot of folks, myself included, thought that the Nashville Predators were going to be one of the best teams in the NHL coming into the year. But now as the month of November is about to end, the Predators sit dead last in the NHL in terms of point percentage, worse than teams who were expected to be bad like the Blackhawks and Sharks. So I'm ready to call a time of death on this season for the Nashville Predators, but what the heck went wrong and what hope do they have going forward? And the simplest answer for what went wrong for the Nashville Predators is a lack of scoring. The Preds are dead last in the NHL when it comes to goals scored this year, despite all that offensive firepower that I mentioned they added in the offseason, plus having elite players like Philip Forsberg, Roman Josi, who are point contributors, and guys like Ryan O'Reilly and Gustav Nyquist in the fold as well. And the reason they're not scoring a lot is, quite frankly, because they are shooting horribly. They have the worst shooting percentage in the NHL and the worst goals scored above expected of any team in the NHL. And that's honestly kind of baffling for a team with this much offensive firepower just to not being able to score. And that talent's definitely coming through on the power play, where they have a 20% power play success rate, so they're middle of the pack in that regard. It's just at 5-on-5, this team has no ability to score. And those big offseason signings, while they have been somewhat disappointing, are still contributing. Both Marchessault and Stamkos had double-digit points on the year. Stamkos' 7 goals are second on the team behind only Philip Forsberg. And even Brady Shea has contributed 9 points in 23 games. They're getting offensive production from the guys they expect it from, just not enough, unfortunately. But ultimately, what struck out in studying this team is how much their defense doesn't transition to their offense. The Predators have the most giveaways of any team in the NHL and the most giveaways in their own defensive zone of any team in the NHL. This team's breakouts and transition game are not good at all, and they have done very little to change tactics, despite having some defensemen like Shea, like Josi, like Alex Carrier, who have proven that they're more than capable of quarterbacking a breakout. And I think all these compounding factors all land largely at the feet of one person, Coach Andrew Brunette. As I mentioned, this team has not been very willing to change their tactics in the defensive zone, and that's also borne out by the fact that he is largely sticking with only 3 defensive pairings throughout this year, all of whom have been caved in when it comes to their expected goal ratio. In particular, he seems to be heavily reliant on the Lauzon-Carrier and Josi-Shea pairings. Both of them have the worst expected goals for ratio of any defensive pairing on the team. While Brunette has begun to experiment with breaking up those pairings a bit more recently, the fact that these 2 pairings in particular have gotten the lion's share of their time together this season, when they're so bad defensively and so bad at generating offensive production as well, really explains why this team is so bad at transitioning out of their own zone and into the offensive zone. I will admit that in part this is because Brady Shea has been a nightmare defensively, and so it's kind of hard for Andrew Brunette to find a pair that actually works for him. But when a guy is so bad he's weighing down your best defenseman, you need to split that pair up and get that guy as few minutes as possible, not anchor him to your all-star defenseman and hope it works out. The way he's playing right now, Brady Shea should honestly be getting third pairing minutes till he manages to find synergy with somebody. So that's what went wrong for the Nashville Predators this season, but should they be set to do a full rebuild like GM Barry Trotz has hinted at, or is there hope that they could recover and actually be good next year? I think the answer is more the latter. I mean, UC Saros, who they just signed to a big extension, is playing really well. His goal saved above expected is among the best in the NHL. Roman Josi, despite being anchored to Brady Shea, has been producing well offensively and has a positive goals for above expected percentage when he's paired with basically anybody who isn't Brady Shea. I know it's hard right now because Lauzon is out, but I would split up Josi and Carrier and put Brady Shea with Luke Schenn on that third pairing. I think the defense could theoretically stabilize itself a little bit better. Now, by doing this, do I think the Nashville Predators will rebound and become a playoff team like we all thought they would be at the end of the year? No, they're probably too far behind the 8 ball. The West is very stacked, and they need to change a lot of tactics, especially in their own end, if they want to have a chance of changing. The point is, I don't think that this is a team that completely needs to do a teardown. I wouldn't be opposed to selling off some pieces at the deadline, especially to recoup draft picks, but they're kind of in the same position as the Washington Capitals from a couple of years ago, where there are still pieces on this team that are very effective, they just need to be coached properly. In particular, Nashville needs to do a much better job of developing young forwards and getting them into the NHL. Yeah, they have guys in their farm system already like Joakim Kemell, David Edstrom, and the recently drafted Yor Surin, but I don't really see see any of those guys as being high-end difference makers like Philip Forsberg was when they acquired him from Washington. So Nashville bottoming out and ending up with a top 5 pick and getting one of those elite forwards, maybe fingers crossed they can end up number 1 and take James Higgins, could send the Nashville Predators right back to winning as soon as next year. But for now, it's another 4 to 5 months of misery in Smashville because their season is fully over.